Okay, Oilers fans, relax. I know that there is a very big belief that maybe a contract with Yamamoto is already in place and we're just waiting until, I don't know, LTIR or until the start of the season to actually make things official, but because it has not been set in stone at the time of recording this piece of audio, what we're going to be doing is talking about all the possibilities, talking about the other aspects of contract negotiations, and just highlighting the entire Kailer Yamamoto story as it has happened so far. So, as you know, our topic for today's video is Kailer Yamamoto of the Edmonton Oilers, who is indeed a current RFA. He's a guy who, at 22 years old from Spokane, is a 5'8", 159-pound right-wing, left-wing player, and he's a guy who the Oilers drafted in the first round of the 2017 NHL Entry Draft. I always kind of thought of Kailer Yamamoto as a potential super underrated draft pick, mostly because in 2017 he was a 99-point player in 65 games played as a draft eligible. Now, even though he was one of the oldest players in the 2017 NHL Entry Draft, he was almost eligible for 2016 had he been born like 2 weeks earlier, he was still a guy that I thought had a really good projectable skill set into the National Hockey League with his hockey smarts, his shiftiness and offensive prowess, not to mention his skating ability as well. Yamamoto, even though he was a small guy, I kind of thought maybe there was a chance he could have dropped to the second round because, I mean, he's 5'8". Not a lot of 5'8 guys get drafted that high anyway, but he kind of did go where he was projected to go, 22nd overall to Edmonton, and ever since then, you know, he's been up and down in Spokane. He was with the Oilers to start off his career. He had the 9-game little stint over there where he had 3 points. Definitely did not look out of place, but of course there was development to be had. In Bakersfield, though, he was a pretty good point producer in the 2 seasons he spent over there, but after bouncing around a little bit for the majority of 2016, 17, and 18, 2019-20 saw Yamamoto make his mark with the Oilers, where he had a 27-game stint in the regular season, and he had 26 points. He was called up sometime in December, I believe, and from then, he had started to play with Draisaitl and Nugent-Hopkins. They tried it out. They were like, okay, let's see what this small guy from Bakersfield can do with another NHL opportunity, because in the previous season, he had spent 17 games with the Oilers. He only had 2 points. The next season was fan-freaking-tastic. Under a point per game, playing with Draisaitl and Nuge, and you kind of saw the best of Yamamoto really start to show itself off in this stint. He really showcased that he had the smarts to compete in the NHL, his shiftiness and his size, his versatility was really complementary to the skills that he did have. Sure, he wasn't a big guy, he wasn't going to power his way around the net, but he could shift his way into open space with and without the puck with ease, and it really made for a good combination with Draisaitl and Nugent-Hopkins. In the postseason, though, he had 0 points in the 4 games played that the Oilers had. It wasn't really a good stint in the playoffs that season, and the bubble anyway, but either way, Yamamoto in this time frame put himself up as a very established NHL caliber forward that in some people's minds, would without a doubt be in a, let's say, a top power play spot with McDavid and Nugent-Hopkins and Draisaitl next season. He would get more playing time because he showed off he was capable of playing with top-tier players in the previous year. We had all these expectations for Yamamoto, and I'm gonna be honest, I kinda jumped on that train as well. I made a video the previous year talking about how I believe he's gonna be a legit, established NHL point producer who could produce at a 60-70 point pace, and how he would really establish that role for himself heading into the long-term future because, I mean, he was drafted in 2017. He's only 22 years old. So he had that potential going into the year, and nevertheless, he did play. He had 52 games played, but he only had 21 points, which is significantly lower than what he was able to produce last season. Now, Daily Faceoff currently lists Yamamoto still on the Nugent-Hopkins-Draisaitl line, but we do know that this previous year, the Oilers were a lot more shuffled around. They were trying to find more depth. They were trying to look for that consistency in other guys in their lineup, aside from, of course, McDavid and Draisaitl. But either way, the way things stand right now, Kailer Yamamoto is indeed an unsigned RFA. And if you take a look at what exactly the possibilities could be for this player in the next contract, there are some questions that arise as to what you should go out there and do. He is a guy who has a lot of potential, and he's got a lot of skill, but he did underperform, which is really bad for contract negotiation purposes because all of a sudden the Oilers have a whole bunch of leverage into giving him a lot less money. Which is why we go over onto NBC Sports, where Adam Gretz had this article published a few days ago examining the NHL's top remaining RFA situations, contracts, offer sheets, and cap space, and we discuss what he says here about Kailer Yamamoto. Take a look at this. It's the team's current cap situation. They're currently more than $2 million over the salary cap the Edmonton Oilers are. Here's the write-up as to what Gretz says about Yamamoto. Offer sheet risk. It should be high. If there's another offer sheet possibility sitting out there, this should be the situation for it. Yamamoto is a very good young player and currently on a team whose salary cap situation would make matching an even modest offer sheet difficult. If Jesperi Kotkaniemi is worth $6.1 million and a first and a third round pick, Yamamoto is certainly worth something in the $4.1 million range. The compensation for that is a second round pick, well worth it if you can get him to sign it. What sort of contract are we going to realistically look at? Almost certainly a shorter term deal. Yamamoto is a good player and he has shown flashes of being a quality top 6 option, but the track record at this point is so small that it would be difficult to commit anything longer term. It also would not make much sense for Yamamoto to commit to that when there is a good chance he could bet on himself, prove his value even more, and turn that into a more significant payday in the future. Now, the idea of an offer sheet for Yamamoto is super intriguing to me, mostly because it's kind of noted in the article right there, but it's a lot easier for an NHL team to go out there and say, we want to make an offer sheet out there. Pettersson? Nah, that's too difficult. He'd be worth like $10 million or whatever if he were to sign an offer sheet. But a guy like Yamamoto, that's one that could be a really cheap option that could go completely against the Oilers and what exactly it is that they could do cap-wise right now. Furthermore, we had ourselves a piece published here by Jim Matheson in the Edmonton Journal asking the question as to whether or not this RFA is a top 6 right winger or just a third liner. The bridge term negotiations with Yamamoto have as much to do with the salary cap and the tight salary cap that the Oilers have as the jury still being out there on where the young winger fits into the bigger picture. Matheson then talks about the other contracts signed in the NHL for other younger players, in particular Philadelphia's Joel Farabee and Ottawa's Drake Batherson. While Philadelphia and Ottawa went all in and gave those guys 6-year deals in the $30 million range with comparable NHL stats to Yamamoto, it's because they obviously felt that both were solid top 6 players. The Oilers clearly want to see more before committing long-term to Yamamoto. Furthermore, we had ourselves Ken Holland, who made himself an appearance on a radio show the other day. This is actually within the past week. It's with Reed Wilkins, and he talks about Yamamoto over here too. There's a difference of opinion right now, and they talked a lot several weeks ago, but then took a breather. Like with Darnell Nurse, sometimes the market gets a bit more concrete, then both parties are forced to agree on what a player's value is, and one side often has to change their mind based on this information. The plan is to sign him prior to training camp. And the way this quote is phrased over here from Holland kind of goes with the idea that there might be some form of a disagreement between the Yamamoto party and the Oilers themselves. So maybe if there is a possibility where Yamamoto and his party, the agents that represent him, they think, okay, he could be a top 6 forward. Like, you give this guy a role, next year he's getting 40, 50 points. If there is that possibility that they see that within himself and the Oilers do not see that, maybe another team can come in there and say, hey, Yamamoto, you think you're worth this amount of money? You think you can get this many points? Here's a 1-year, $4 million contract. If you sign this, you come over to us. We give up a second-round pick for what could be a potential top 6 player, and the Oilers wouldn't really be in a position where they could just easily match it because they're $2 million over the salary cap right now. They would need to clear up a lot more money in order to actually do that. So for the Oilers, they are kind of in a pretty precarious situation if another team really sees value in Yamamoto and what exactly it is he could bring. I've said it this entire time, especially in the past few years or so, that I do think that Yamamoto does have a boatload of value heading into the long-term future. We're seeing this with other guys like Nick Suzuki, who also happens to have Japanese heritage over there, that you don't need to be big anymore to be good at the NHL level, and Yamamoto last year definitely proved that with Nugent-Hopkins and Draisaitl. It's just, this previous season was a really big deterrent, so he has no leverage anymore in these contract talks, which is the entire subject as to what Matheson's article is actually about anyway too, so link in the description if you want to go ahead and read that. But talk to me in the comments, what do you think about Gretz's little write-up over here on NBC, talking about how Yamamoto could be a prime offer sheet target, whether or not you would offer sheet him for $4 million-ish if you're another NHL team, would you give up a second-round pick for what could be a potential 50-point guy, but who is not guaranteed in the slightest? If you're an Oilers fan, what do you predict the contract is going to be like? Because Ken Holland did say the plan is to get him re-signed. They don't really have any plans of letting him go or letting him get signed to an offer sheet. They would not want to see him on another team next season. but what is that contract going to be, and what is his role on the team going to be next season, assuming he does stick around? Talk to me in the comments. What do you think about Kailer Yamamoto in this entire conversation over here? I hope you enjoyed this Trolls 99, and bye.